10 years ago, I stood in my guest room, barefoot, trying to step over a toppled stack of old magazines, and couldn't find the floor. It hit me right then. I hadn't just collected things. I built walls with them. Not to keep people out, but because I didn't know how to let go. Fast forward to today, my space is open, calm, and surprisingly joyful. I live with less. But somehow, I feel like I finally have more. If you're over 60 and looking around your home thinking, how did I end up with so much? You're not alone. Maybe it's holiday decorations from a decade ago, your kids' art projects, 5 sets of mixing bowls you rarely touch, or inherited items that whisper guilt when you walk past them. It builds slowly, one well-meaning "I might need this" at a time, until you realize your home has quietly become a museum of every season of your life. But here's the truth, this isn't about stuff. It's about space, for peace, for safety, for breathing room in your later years. Over the past decade, I learned some deeply personal, sometimes painful, and surprisingly freeing lessons about what it really means to let go. Lessons that go beyond the closets and kitchen drawers. If you're ready to breathe again in your own home, and maybe even discover a lighter version of yourself, tap like, hit subscribe, and come with me. This might be your beginning too. It started on a quiet Tuesday. Nothing special about it, just me, my favorite robe, a cup of tea, and the usual plan to settle into my recliner with the afternoon news. But as I walked from the kitchen to the living room, I caught the edge of an old plastic storage bin that had been sitting half pulled from under the hallway table for weeks. My foot snagged, my hand flailed, and the tea sloshed out before I hit the ground. No broken bones. No ambulance. Just me, on the carpet, heart racing, legs sore. And one chipped mug lying next to me, faded, scratched, and older than my youngest grandchild. It said "World's Best" and 1984 in crooked red lettering. And I sat there thinking, not about the fall, but about the mug. Why is this still here? I hadn't used it in years. The handle had a hairline crack. The color had dulled. It didn't even sit level anymore. But I remembered exactly who gave it to me. I remembered the wrapping paper, the kitchen we were in, the birthday music playing faintly in the background. That's when the real question came, was I keeping the mug? Or was I keeping that moment? At that age, early 60s, I thought I understood what sentimental meant. But that fall forced me to admit something harder. I wasn't just keeping things. I was keeping versions of myself. The young aunt. The full-time mother. The holiday hostess. The newlywed. The woman who once baked 5 pies for Thanksgiving without breaking a sweat. Each object had become a snapshot. And I didn't know who I was without the slideshow. That day didn't just bruise my shin, it opened my eyes. Because no one talks about how heavy memory can be when it piles up on shelves and under beds. And if we're not careful, we start building a life around who we used to be, instead of clearing space to live who we are right now. So I stood up, not just off the floor, but into a decision. The chipped mug went into the donation box that very evening. That was the first goodbye in a long line of many. And it started with a simple truth, I wasn't in that cup anymore. I was in this moment. And this moment deserved room to breathe. The first bag out wasn't filled with anything remarkable, just expired spices, old receipts, mismatched charger cords, and a decorative candle that hadn't been lit in over a decade. It was one of those plastic grocery bags with the stretched-out handles that make too much noise when you carry them. But as I tied the top into a knot and set it by the door, I stood there and cried. Not a big, sobbing cry, just quiet tears I didn't expect. Because it wasn't the items I was mourning. It was what they represented. The cinnamon jar with the torn label reminded me of the pies I used to bake every Saturday when the kids were small. The frayed extension cord came from the old craft table I used during my wreath-making phase. Even the candle, still faintly scented, was from a dinner party we hosted during the 2008 election season. None of it worked. None of it mattered anymore. But somehow, it felt like I was throwing away tiny pieces of who I had been. At 60 plus, decluttering doesn't feel like cleaning. It feels like peeling back old layers of self. And that's why it's so hard. No one tells you this. The deeper challenge isn't deciding what goes. It's facing who you think you'll stop being once it's gone. Would I still feel like a mother if I gave away the crib quilt tucked in my linen closet? Would I still be seen as capable if I let go of the sewing machine I hadn't touched in 7 years? Would I still be me without all the maybe someday stuff lining the back shelves? That little grocery bag opened the floodgates, not just in my house, but in my mind. It made me realize how many decisions I had been avoiding, not because I was lazy, but because I was scared of who I'd be on the other side. So if you've ever stood frozen with something in your hands for 10 minutes, turning it over, remembering, doubting, second-guessing, just know I've been there too. Let me know in the comments, what was it for you? Sometimes, it takes just one bag to start the shift. Not because the items were big, but because the courage it takes to let go, especially after 60, is one of the quietest, strongest things we ever do. For years, I had a corner shelf in my hallway, dusty, a little wobbly, and completely devoted to one thing: porcelain cats. There were over 20 of them. One wore a Christmas scarf. Another held a fake crystal ball. They were different sizes, styles, and colors, but they all had one thing in common: I hadn't bought a single one. They came from people I loved: my late sister, a friend from church, an old neighbor who passed on years ago. Each gift came with a smile, a hug, maybe a card. "I saw this and thought of you," they'd say. And over time, those little cats started to multiply, not because I loved them, but because I didn't know how to say no. And even worse, I didn't know how to let go. At first, they felt like tokens of love. But over time, I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't keeping those porcelain cats out of joy. I was keeping them out of guilt. The guilt of feeling ungrateful. The guilt of outliving the giver. The guilt of wondering, what would they think if they knew I let this go? That was a hard truth to face. Because I had always prided myself on being thoughtful, respectful, sentimental even. But here's what I finally came to understand. Keeping something out of guilt is not love. It's fear. Fear of hurting someone's memory. Fear of being seen as cold or dismissive. Fear of letting a connection die. But the connection doesn't live in a ceramic figurine. It lives in how we remember, in how we tell the stories, in how we carry forward the spirit of the people who mattered. So I made a new practice for myself. When I felt unsure about letting something go, I took a photo of it. Then I wrote one short paragraph, a memory or moment tied to the person who gave it. That way, I wasn't erasing anything. I was preserving it in a more meaningful way. Then I'd either donate the item or pass it on to someone who might actually use or enjoy it. Because if something's been collecting dust in my home for 10 years, it's not serving me. But it might serve someone else in ways I never imagined. So let me ask you, what's one thing you've kept that you didn't actually choose? Let's talk about it in the comments. You're not dishonoring anyone by letting go. You're simply choosing freedom over obligation. And at our age, that's one of the most loving things we can do, for ourselves and for the people we hope will someday clean up after us. It was supposed to be a small task, just clearing off the kitchen counters. I wasn't doing anything dramatic. No big decluttering project. Just wiping them clean after realizing I hadn't seen the actual surface in weeks. There had been a constant line of unopened mail, grocery coupons, half-used vitamins, a bowl of random keys, and a stack of magazines from last spring. But once I cleared it, all of it, I stood back and something in me shifted. The kitchen suddenly felt lighter, like it had exhaled. That night, for the first time in what felt like months, I fell asleep easily. No tossing. No endless mental checklists. Just rest. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. But then I noticed a pattern. Each time I cleared even a small section of visual clutter, my desk, the entryway table, the top of the washer, I felt noticeably calmer. More focused. And yes, I slept better. That's when I started reading about it. Turns out, it's not just emotional, it's biological. Scientists say our brains register visual clutter as unfinished business. Even if we're not consciously thinking about it, our minds are constantly trying to process what they see. Piles of paper? That's a reminder to do something. Overflowing drawers? More unfinished tasks. Every little item becomes another mental tab left open. And over time, Especially after 60, when we're more prone to anxiety, insomnia, or overstimulation, those tabs don't close easily. That's why we feel worn down without knowing why. Clearing the counter wasn't just about tidying. It was about creating peace in my own head. I didn't realize how much background noise all that clutter was making until it was gone. That's when I started doing it more often, not the whole house at once, just small zones. The end table. The kitchen table. The nightstand. I'd give myself 10 minutes and let peace grow in patches. Because here's something I never knew, peace is not always about silence. Sometimes, peace is about absence, the absence of things that nag at us when we walk by them every day. And at this age, peace is the new luxury. It costs nothing, but it's worth everything. But not everything was peaceful. There were days I wanted to quit. Days the emotions hit harder than expected. That part, we'll talk about next. Somewhere around month 4 of my decluttering journey, I hit a wall. Not literally, though there were times the piles made that possible, but mentally. I've been making good progress, clearing closets, organizing drawers, even donating bags of items I once swore I'd never part with. But one afternoon, sitting on the bedroom floor with a half-empty box of tangled jewelry and loose buttons, I froze. I held one item in my hand, a brooch from the 80s that I hadn't worn in decades. I just stared at it, weighing its value, its meaning, its history. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Before I knew it, an hour had gone by and I hadn't made a single decision. That's when I realized, the process wasn't hard because of the stuff, it was hard because of the spiral. That moment of staring, remembering, doubting, negotiating with myself. It was exhausting. And if I kept going like that, I'd never finish. So I gave myself a rule. Something simple enough to stick to, but strong enough to keep me moving. If I couldn't decide what to do with an item in 3 minutes, I would set it aside and move on. No more endless deliberating. No more guilt spirals over what might be useful someday or what Aunt Nora would have wanted. Just 3 minutes. Decide, or defer. I even set a soft timer at first, not to pressure myself, but to remind myself that forward motion mattered more than perfection. And it worked. Because here's something nobody tells you when you start decluttering after 60. It's not about speed. It's about sustainability. You don't need to power through your whole house in a weekend. You need to protect your energy, emotional, physical, mental, so that you can keep showing up again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. This rule saved me from burning out. It helped me preserve the joy of letting go, without drowning in analysis. And here's a bonus tip. I kept a small undecided box. Once a week, I'd revisit it, with fresh eyes, less pressure, and a clearer mind. More often than not, the answer came quicker than I expected. So if you find yourself stuck, staring at something for too long, give yourself permission to pause. Not forever, but for now. It's okay to set it down. It's okay not to solve it all today. Because lasting change isn't built in big leaps. It's built in small, kind choices, over time. I expected decluttering to be a personal challenge, emotional, yes, even exhausting at times. But what I didn't expect was the resistance that came from outside. From the people I loved most. One afternoon, after donating a box of unused serving platters and old picture frames, my daughter stopped by. She opened the hall closet, looked around, and frowned. "Wait, where's the big punch bowl? And the photo albums?" she asked. "I donated the punch bowl," I said calmly. "And I scanned the photos. They're saved on a flash drive." She looked at me like I'd thrown away a family heirloom. "But Mom, that stuff was still good. What if we need it someday?" That moment hit harder than I care to admit. Because she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to hold on to something, just like I had for years. But suddenly, the roles had flipped. I was letting go, and she was the one clinging on. And that wasn't the only time. A nephew once brought over a few boxes from the family garage, things I hadn't seen in 20 years. "We figured you'd want these back," he said. Inside? Old wedding centerpieces, a broken floor lamp, and 3 sets of silverware. I didn't even recognize half of it. That's when I had to learn one of the most liberating phrases I've ever used. If you love it so much, you're welcome to take it home. It wasn't rude. It wasn't cold. It was just the truth. Because somewhere along the way, I had accepted the silent burden of everyone's expectations. Keep this for the family. Hold on to that in case someone wants it later. You're the keeper of our memories, right? No. I'm not a storage unit. I'm a person. A woman who's earned the right to live in a home that reflects who she is now, not just who she was, or what others think she should save. You don't owe anyone the burden of your storage. Not your children, not your cousins, not even the well-meaning neighbor who dropped off an extra fondue pot just in case. And here's a simple truth, if someone truly values the item, they'll gladly take it. If not, it's okay to let it go. Let me ask you, have you ever felt pressured to keep something for the family? How did you respond? Drop it in the comments, I'd love to hear your story. Because this isn't just about things. It's about boundaries. And peace. And claiming your space, on your terms. There was a hand-knitted blanket from my Aunt Rena, soft lavender yarn, a little stretched at the edges, with one spot that had unraveled and been retied. She made it for me the year I turned 35. I remember her giving it to me in a grocery bag, folded neatly, her hands a little shaky even then. I didn't follow a pattern, she said proudly. But I made it with prayer in every stitch. For years, it stayed folded in the cedar chest at the end of my bed. I rarely took it out. It was too delicate to use, but too precious to part with. It moved with me 3 times. It held the scent of lavender sachets in time. But one day, in a rush of momentum, during a stretch when I was clearing out fast and strong, I let it go. It wasn't impulsive, exactly. I just told myself, it's been stored for 20 years. It's time to let someone else enjoy it. So I folded it one last time and donated it to a local women's shelter. And then, weeks later, I missed it. Not in a haunting, regretful way. But in a quiet, hollow kind of way. I missed the feel of the yarn. I missed the memory of her smile. I missed the connection that somehow lived in those imperfect rows. At first, I beat myself up for letting it go. How could I? Why didn't I think more clearly? Why didn't I hold on to just that one thing? But then I realized something deeply freeing, missing something is human. That doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. Decluttering doesn't mean we stop feeling. Letting go doesn't mean we erase the past. Sometimes, even the right decision will tug at your heart. That's part of it. So I created a new habit. Before letting go of anything truly meaningful, I sit down with a cup of tea and write. Not just about the object, but about the memory. Who gave it to me? What moment it marked? What it meant at the time? Sometimes I even include a photo. Sometimes I just describe it in detail. And then, when I do choose to part with it, I know the story hasn't been lost. I've just moved it into a different place, one I can revisit anytime, without dust or boxes or guilt. If you've ever missed something you let go of, I want you to know, it's okay. You're allowed to feel the ache and still be proud of the progress. Because freedom isn't about never looking back. It's about knowing that you can, and still move forward. There's something deeply healing about walking barefoot through your own home and not worrying about where your next step will land. No baskets jutting into the hallway, no stacks of papers teetering on the coffee table, no forgotten boxes lurking beneath the dining room chairs. Just space. Honest, quiet, breathable space. These days, I open my kitchen cabinets and find only what I actually use. My favorite mug, one good skillet, the mixing bowl I reach for every Sunday morning. Nothing tumbles out. Nothing sighs against the door. There's no guessing game of where did I put that? Because everything I kept has a place, and everything with no place is no longer mine to carry. But maybe the biggest shift? I now have a chair in the corner of my living room that I sit in. Just to sit. Not to fold laundry. Not to sort coupons. Not to get through anything. Just to pause, to think, to watch the afternoon light stretch across the floor. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel guilty about it. That might be the most underrated gift of all, a space that invites stillness without shame. Because here's what I've learned, decluttering after 60 isn't about becoming a minimalist. It's not about counting items or living with less for the sake of some trend. It's about something much deeper, much older, and much wiser. It's about making room for life to keep happening. Not the life we used to have. Not the version that revolved around raising kids, building careers, or hosting holidays. But the life we live now, this quieter, gentler, but no less meaningful season. Decluttering gave me a house that feels like a home again. Not because it's perfect or polished, but because it finally reflects the woman I've become, not the roles I've outgrown. There's peace in every open drawer. There's clarity in every shelf I no longer have to rearrange. There's freedom in being able to sit down and breathe, knowing the space around me supports the life I'm choosing, today. And that's the truth I wish I'd known years ago. You're not just clearing things. You're creating space for who you are now to fully live. After 10 years of sorting, deciding, donating, and sometimes crying, this is what I now know for sure. Less is not lonely. The empty spaces in my home didn't echo sadness, they whispered freedom. I no longer live surrounded by just-in-case clutter. I live surrounded by what serves me, what brings peace, and what reflects who I am today. Empty shelves are not sad. They're restful. They invite breathing room. They don't ask for attention, maintenance, or memory. They simply wait for a vase of fresh flowers, a library book, or nothing at all. And that's beautiful. And I've never once missed the pile of someday clothes. You know the ones. The suits for events you no longer attend. The jeans for a size you may never return to. The shoes with heels you no longer chase. I let them go, and gained closet space, clarity, and a bit of self-compassion in return. So if you're over 60 and you feel like your home has started to close in around you, not from anything sudden, but from years of accumulation, I want to say this gently, but clearly. It's not too late to take it back. Not with a giant, overwhelming purge. But with one small, kind, conscious step at a time. Start with the drawer that annoys you. Start with the shelf you haven't touched in a decade. Start with the box you avoid because you might deal with it later. Because every time you let something go, you're choosing space over burden. Peace over pressure. Today over yesterday. If any part of this story mirrors your own journey, drop a comment below. What's one thing, just one, that you're finally ready to let go of? Tap that like button if you found comfort or courage in this story. Subscribe to Wise Aging Seniors for more honest, heart-driven reflections, and share this video with someone who's quietly craving a fresh start. Because sometimes, the heaviest weight we carry isn't what's in our hands. It's what we've convinced ourselves we have to keep.